Hey guys, it's Six Paths Theorist here, back again with another part of What If Naruto Had Sasuke's Sharingan. Before we dive in, please, as always, like, share and subscribe to the channel. It really helps me out. Without further ado, let's get into it.
Chapter 3 The New Teams 7 Part 1 The Graft and the Ghosts. The morning light in the Hokage office was pale and unforgiving, illuminating dust motes dancing over stacks of unresolved paperwork. Sarutobi Hiruzen sat behind his desk, the weight of the village literally and figuratively upon his shoulders. In his hands was not a mission report or a budget sheet, but the concise, clinical summary from the head medic regarding Uzumaki Naruto's postoperative assessment. The contents were an anomaly. The graft was a full success with superior visual acuity. That was expected, given the donor and recipient's unique biologies, but the notes on the Sharingan were what gave him pause. Subject demonstrates conscious, willful activation and deactivation of the transplanted Dojutsu. No observed strain or chakra drain atypical for baseline Sharingan use. No evidence of the borrowed power degradation sometimes noted in non-Uchiha recipients. Hiruzen set the scroll down, his pipe cold in its stand. How? The Sharingan was a Kekkei Genkai, a bloodline limit, awakened through intense trauma and fueled by specific Uchiha chakra. Kakashi's use of it was a famous testament to his genius, but it was also a famous drain. For Naruto to wield it with such apparent instinctive control, it defied established understanding. Was it the influence of the Kyubai's boundless chakra stabilizing it? Or was it something in the nature of Sasuke's final, willing sacrificer seal that had not just transferred organs, but had rewritten the rules of the transfer itself? It was a curious, and potentially monumental, thing. A sharp, precise knock at the door interrupted his musings. He didn't need the chakra signature to know who it represented. The timing was too perfect, the rhythm too controlled. "Enter," Hiruzen said, his voice weary before the conversation even began. The door opened to admit the village elders, Hamura Mitokado and Koharu Utatane. Their expressions were as they always were, pinched with a permanent concern that bordered on disapproval. But today there was a glint of purpose in their eyes that made Hiruzen's heart sink. Could his day not get better, just once in a while? It was a question he asked himself more and more these days. "Hokage-sama," Koharu began, dispensing with pleasantries. "We have reviewed the status of Team 7. The loss of the Uchiha is regrettable, but it leaves a critical gap in the team's composition and ranking potential. A three-man cell is a foundational unit. It cannot remain a two-man cell indefinitely." Hamura nodded, stepping forward. "To that end we have a candidate to fill the vacancy, an exceptional talent from the ancillary training programs." He gestured to the doorway. A boy stepped inside. He was perhaps Naruto and Sakura's age, with jet black hair styled in an impeccable sharp cut and pale, almost unnervingly smooth skin. His eyes were dark, and his lips were curved into a pleasant, unwavering smile that didn't touch the emptiness in his gaze. He wore a standard Jonin-style vest over a high-collared shirt, but something about his posture screamed a different kind of discipline than the academy taught. "This is Sai," Koharu announced. "He was the personal apprentice of our late colleague Danzo. His skills in reconnaissance, infiltration, and artistry are top tier. He is more than capable of filling the Uchiha's spot on Hate's squad." Hiruzen felt a cold knot form in his stomach. Danzo's apprentice. The words were a poison. This was no simple genin transfer. This was an insertion. Root might have been officially disbanded, but its vines clearly still reached into the deepest soils of Konoha's power structure. Sai was not a replacement for Sasuke, he was a plant. A censor and a spy, meant to monitor the Jinchuriki who now carried the last loyal Uchiha's Aiza situation Danzo would have found intolerably unpredictable. "The team has just suffered a severe trauma," Hiruzen argued, his tone firmer. "Kakashi and the two remaining members need time to grieve, to adjust. Forcing a new teammate on them, especially one from such a specific background, could be destabilizing. Perhaps after the Chunin exams, or..." "The stability of the village's weaponets teams is paramount," Hamura interrupted, his voice leaving no room for debate. "The boy is ready. The team needs a third. The logic is inescapable, Hiruzen. Sentiment cannot override operational integrity." Hiruzen looked from their resolute faces to Sai's placid, smiling mask. He saw the trap. They had moved quickly, using the official tragedy to push their agenda. To argue further would be to openly accuse them of ulterior motives with no proof, to shatter the already fragile consensus of the village leadership. In matters of overt village security, the council's will could override even the Hokage's hesitation. He felt the fight drain out of him, replaced by a familiar, heavy resignation. He had lost too many battles in these very rooms. Fine, he conceded, the word tasting of ash. I will let Kakashi know. He will assess the new candidate. It was the only concession he could wrestle, allowing Kakashi, at least, to be the gatekeeper. Very good, Koharu said, a note of finality in her voice. With curt nods, the two elders turned and left, Sai offering a perfectly timed, shallow bow before following them out, his silent footsteps making no sound on the polished floor. Alone again, Hiruzen sighed, the sound echoing in the now silent office. He looked out the window towards the district where a certain blonde-haired, onyx-eyed boy likely was. He had not seen Naruto since the team's return from Wave. There was so much he wanted to ask, to observe, to apologize for. The boy was carrying burdens no child should ever bear, and now Hiruzen had just allowed another potential threat to be placed at his side. Maybe I could give a visit later. The thought was a reflex of guilt, but he looked at the mountain of scrolls on his desk, the invisible walls of politics that confined him, and the weary age in his own bones. No, he thought with a sad, internal shake of his head, I'll see him eventually. The affairs of the village and its shadows would ensure that their paths would cross again, likely under less than pleasant circumstances. He had allowed the new piece to be placed on the board. Now he could only watch and hope Kakashi could control the game. The air in the Konoha cemetery was always still, heavy with memory and the faint, damp scent of moss on old stone. Kakashi Hatake stood before a specific, unassuming monument, his usual slouch absent, his posture straight as a kunai. The name etched into the black rock Uchiha Obito seemed to pulse in the late afternoon light. His single visible eye was not fixed on the engraving, but on the middle distance, seeing a different bridge, a different mist, a different sacrifice. The memory played with crystal, gut-wrenching clarity, the demonic ice mirrors, the glint of Senbon, Sasuke's sudden, desperate lunge, the thwip of the needles finding home, the way Naruto had been shoved to safety, left to scream while his savior fell. The image bled, color and time shifting, the screech of falling rocks in the dimness of Kanabi Bridge, a different, broader shove, a voice, bright and brash, yelling at him to take care of Rin, the crushing weight of the earth where Obito had been, being saved at the ultimate cost. History wasn't just repeating itself, it was a morbid canon, a cruel round where the melody of sacrifice played over and over with different instruments. Obito had given him an eye, Sasuke had given Naruto both acts born from a selfless, fatal push. The parallels were a vice around Kakashi's heart. He had failed Obito by not protecting Rin. He had failed Minato-sensei by letting his son, the Jinchuriki, be blinded and burdened with a dead friend's hatred. He had failed Sasuke by not being strong enough or fast enough to prevent the choice that small, proud back had been forced to make. For years he had carried the ideology of teamwork as Obito's legacy. Those who break the rules are trash, but those who abandon their comrades are worse than trash. He had preached it, believed it, but on the bridge in Wave he had seen the brutal, logical end of that ideal. Comrades could sacrifice themselves for each other. That was the highest form of teamwork, and its most devastating failure. A new resolve, cold and hard as the gravestone before him, crystallized in his core. Teamwork was necessary, it was vital, but without the proper skills to back it up, it was just a slower, more tragic way to die. Sacrifice should be a last, horrific resort, not the default strategy of a team outmatched. He had let his team believe survival and growth would come from bonding over ramen and frustration. He had been wrong. He would not lose another student to a noble. Useless death. He would not let Naruto, carrying the weight of 2 legacies, be forced to watch another person die for him. He would not let Sakura be paralyzed by her own perceived weakness again. Obito, he said quietly, the first word he'd spoken at the grave in years. I think I finally understand what you left me, not just the eye, the lesson. It wasn't just about saving comrades. It was about being strong enough that your comrades never needed saving in the first place. He turned his back on the grave, the decision made. The time for lazy observation, for passive lessons disguised as tests, was over. The 2-week medical leave for his surviving genin was not a vacation, it was his preparation period. He would pit his team through a grueling training regimen the likes of which they could not imagine. He would drill them until their muscles failed and their chakra ran dry, then drill them more. He would force them to confront their weaknesses: Naruto's lack of finesse, Sakura's lack of combat instinct, and the glaring, Sasuke-shaped hole in their formation, not with pep talks, but with relentless punishing practice. He would teach Naruto control, to master the storm of power within him and the stolen eyes on his face. He would forge Sakura from a brain into a weapon, giving her the tangible strength to back up her newfound resolve. And he would do it while integrating this new, smiling enigma, Sai, assessing the threat he posed even as he tried to mold him into a functional teammate. The goal was no longer just to create a competent genin cell. The goal was to create survivors, to forge them into shinobi so skilled, so resilient, so tactically aware, that the terrible, self-sacrificial choice would never again be their only option. To prevent the other thing, the lonely walk from a graveside, the weight of a ghost's eyes, the echo of a push from ever happening again. As he walked away from the cemetery, the shadow of the memorial stone long at his back, Hatake Kakashi moved with a new purpose. The copy ninja, the man of 1,000 jutsu, was gone. In his place was a drill instructor, a strategist of survival, ready to build a team that could withstand the horrors he knew awaited them. The training for the new Team 7 would begin not with bells, but with blood, sweat, and the grim determination to cheat death itself. The quiet of the Haruno household was no longer a place for weeping, but for study. Sakura's room had been transformed. Frivolities were boxed away. In their place, stacked with military precision on her desk and floor, were scrolls and texts with titles that spoke of grim practicality. The chakra system, pathways and blockages, field triage for hemorrhagic trauma, neurological interference. The theory of genjutsu, psychosomatic manipulation in combat. Sakura sat in the epicenter of this new world, her face a mask of fierce concentration. Her eyes, once prone to drifting towards daydreams of a certain Uchiha, now scanned dense medical diagrams and complex chakra formulae with a relentless analytical hunger. She wasn't just reading, she was dissecting, memorizing, cross-referencing. Every muscle group, every major tenketsu point, every known genjutsu release method, she committed them to memory. Knowledge was no longer for tests. It was for the next time a senbon flew, for the next time she saw a teammate falling. She would understand the weapon, the wound, and the counter. But theory was a skeleton, it needed flesh. The next afternoon she presented herself at Konoha Hospital, not as a visitor but as a volunteer. Her request was simple, direct, and delivered with a steely calm that made the administrator blink. She wished to apprentice in the medical ward, to observe and assist in any capacity. She was assigned to Yakushi Kabuto. Kabuto was a study in unassuming competence. With his silver hair, round glasses, and perpetually mild expression, he seemed more like a dedicated librarian than a medical ninja of note. His talent, as far as the hospital staff was concerned, was reliable but nothing to brag about, solid, thorough, excellent with paperwork and patient care, but lacking the flashy, life-saving genius of a true prodigy like Tsunade Senju. He was, in short, the perfect, unobtrusive teacher for a determined beginner. "Haruno-san, welcome," he said, his smile friendly and practiced. "Let's start with the supply room. Knowing where every bandage, every vial of antiseptic is located is the first step in saving a life. Speed is born from familiarity." Sakura followed him, her eyes missing nothing. She learned the layout with a speed that made Kabuto's eyebrows rise slightly behind his glasses. She asked precise, intelligent questions about sterilization techniques, the shelf life of various coagulants, and the chakra cost of different diagnostic palms. As days passed, he guided her through basic patient care-changing dressings, monitoring chakra levels with simple devices, preparing herbal poultices. He was a patient instructor, his explanations clear, his hands steady and sure. He praised her meticulousness, her quick grasp of theory. "Your foundational knowledge is exceptional, Haruno-san. You have a true healer's mind for detail." Occasionally, during lulls in the ward, he would lean against a supply cabinet, his expression softening with a well-practiced empathy. "How are you holding up?" he would ask, his voice dropping to a confidential tone. After your teammates passing, it must be very difficult. The first time he asked, Sakura stiffened, her hands pausing as she sorted scalpels. She saw the bridge, the blood, the ice. She felt the old, useless panic try to rise. Then she saw Naruto's bandaged face, his new solemn determination. She exhaled, the breath controlled. It is, she said, her voice not trembling but flat and factual. She did not elaborate, she did not break down. She simply acknowledged the pain as one acknowledges a chronic injury, a part of her landscape now, to be worked around. Kabuto would nod, his eyes behind his glasses unreadable. This is a good path you're on, he'd say gently. Turning grief into a skill that can protect others, it's a very noble thing. Sasuke-kun would. He'd trail off, as if the sentiment were too delicate to finish. The mention of Sasuke's name was a needle, but Sakura did not flinch visibly. She would simply give a small, tight nod and return to her task with renewed, almost violent focus. Kabuto's friendly, understanding demeanor was a balm the old Sakura would have clung to. The new Sakura accepted it as part of the environment, like the antiseptic smell, useful but not to be relied upon. Her trust was a scarce resource now, allocated only to her mission and to the people directly involved in it. Unbeknownst to her, behind the friendly smiles and helpful advice, Kabuto's mind was filing away every detail. The speed of her learning, the steel in her spine when confronted with grief, the specific, aggressive direction of her studies straight towards combat medicine and genjutsu theory, with no interest in pediatrics or long-term care. He noted her loyalty to the remaining teammate, the way her resolve seemed to orbit around Uzumaki Naruto's well-being. Each observation was a neat, mental note, added to a growing dossier not for the hospital, but for a different master entirely. He was helping her build her skills, all the while carefully mapping the architecture of her new, fortified heart. Sakura gave a final, precise tap to secure the bandage on the elderly woman's forearm. The dressing was neat, firm without being restrictive, a perfect application of the morning's lesson. "All right, that's that," she said, her voice clinically pleasant. "Keep it dry and come back in 2 days for a change." The woman smiled warmly, flexing her hand. "Thanks, Haruno-san, you have a gentle touch." Sakura offered a small, professional smile in return, but her mind was already moving to the next task, the next skill to acquire. As the patient left the examination room, Kabuto entered, leaning against the doorframe with his characteristic mild expression. "Well," he said, adjusting his glasses, "you've passed your first aid starter course with flying colors. Your precision is remarkable." His praise was genuine, yet it carried the faint, constant hum of appraisal. "Anyway, now we can move to slightly more advanced material. Starting tomorrow, chakra diagnosis techniques and the foundational theory behind the mystical palm jutsu for minor wound sealing. It's where medical ninjutsu truly begins." Sakura's heart gave a single, hard thump of anticipation. This was the threshold. First aid was civilian work. Chakra diagnosis and the mystical palm were the first steps into becoming a true medical ninja role that combined her intellect with the power to directly alter the battlefield. She nodded, a sharp, decisive motion. "I'll be ready." Later, as she walked home through the lengthening shadows of late afternoon, the theoretical diagrams of chakra pathways still flickering behind her eyes, another thread of her research surfaced. Medical knowledge was defense, was stabilization. But to protect Naruto, to become a true shield, she needed more than healing. She needed to understand the tools of the enemy. She needed to master not just the cure, but the poison. Poison, the thought was dark, pragmatic. She had been reading about toxicology, about plants and compounds that could paralyze, disorient, or kill. Theory was insufficient. She needed specimens, needed to understand their smell, their texture, their properties firsthand. Her path home was habitual, but now she broke from it. At the next corner, instead of turning left towards her district, she turned right, her steps quickening with purpose. Her destination was not a library or an apothecary, but a place that dealt in more delicate, living toxins, the Yamanaka flower shop. The shop was a burst of color and scent amidst the more dour village buildings. Blooms of every hue spilled from baskets and pots. To most, it was a place of beauty and sentiment. To a kunoichi studying the lethal side of botany, it was a potential arsenal. Many beautiful flowers housed deadly secrets in their nectar, pollen, or roots. The Yamanaka, with their deep knowledge of the mind and the natural world, would have access to such things, or would know where to find them. She pushed the door open, a small bell chiming softly overhead. The interior was a humid, fragrant jungle. She stood for a moment, her analytical eyes scanning not for bouquets, but for the specific, often inconspicuous plants she had seen in her textbooks: foxglove, monkshood, oleander. Her resolve was a quiet, steady hum. She was here to learn the language of silent, creeping death, so she could better guard against it. Every skill, from healing palms to poisonous knowledge, was another brick in the fortress she was building around her remaining teammate. The fragrant air of the flower shop was thick, almost cloying. Sakura's eyes, sharp and analytical, swept over clusters of vibrant blooms, searching for the more subdued, potentially dangerous foliage she'd studied in her scrolls. She was so focused on her mission on turning beauty into a lesson in lethality that she didn't notice the figure emerging from behind a towering arrangement of sunflowers until a voice, softer and more hesitant than she'd ever heard it, cut through her concentration. Sakura. Sakura froze. She knew that voice. It was a voice associated with loud arguments over vanity and boys, with competitive glares across the academy classroom. She slowly turned. Ino Yamanaka stood behind the polished wooden counter, a bundle of lavender in her hands, but the usual proud tilt of her chin was absent. Her bright blue eyes, usually sparkling with competitive fire or gossipy curiosity, were wide and soft with concern. The dramatic blonde ponytail was the same, but the girl wearing it seemed diminished, sobered. For a long, awkward moment, the two former friends, now rivals by design, just looked at each other amidst the silent, watching flowers. The usual barbs, the boasts about Sasuke-kun, died before they could be born. The bridge in Wave had cast a long shadow, and it had reached even here. Ino was the first to break the silence. She set the lavender down carefully as if it might shatter. We heard about Sasuke. She swallowed, her fingers fidgeting with the edge of her apron. I'm really sorry, Sakura. The words weren't the polished sympathy of an adult or the clinical acknowledgement of Kabuto. They were clumsy, heartfelt, and raw. They came from someone who, for all their rivalry, had known Sakura for years, had known the depth of her infatuation, and could therefore guess at the depth of her devastation. Sakura felt a strange tightness in her chest. This wasn't what she'd come here for. She'd come for poison, for knowledge, for armor, not for this disarming, genuine kindness that threatened to find the cracks in her new, fortified shell. Ino took a tentative step forward, her voice dropping to a near whisper. I can't even imagine. He was really strong, you know, to go out like that, protecting someone. She trailed off, her gaze dropping to the floor before flicking back up, meeting Sakura's with a surprising intensity. How are you holding up? And Naruto. The mention of Naruto's name, coupled with the sincere worry in Ino's tone, was the key that turned in the lock. Sakura's carefully maintained composure didn't break, but it softened at the edges. The cold, analytical glint in her eyes wavered, revealing a glimpse of the profound exhaustion and grief beneath. I'm managing, Sakura said, the words feeling inadequate. Her voice was quiet but not weak. It was the voice of someone conserving energy for a long haul. Naruto is healing. It was all she could offer, and it was more truth than she'd given anyone else. Ino nodded, understanding that managing and healing were probably the bravest words Sakura could muster. She didn't press. Instead, she did something entirely unexpected. She reached under the counter and pulled out a single stem, not from a showy bouquet, but from a simple clay pot near the window. It was a sprig of rosemary, its needle-like leaves a resilient green, its scent clean and sharp, known for remembrance and clarity. Here, Ino said, holding it out. It wasn't a dramatic gesture. It was small, simple. It's not much, but it's for remembrance and for strength. They're tougher than they look, these things, hard to kill. Sakura looked at the offered sprig, then back at Ino's face, which was free of its usual triumphant smirk, filled only with a shared, somber empathy. The rivalry was still there somewhere, but it was buried under the weight of a loss that touched everyone who knew what it meant to be a genin, to have a team. Slowly, Sakura reached out and took the rosemary. The leaves were firm under her fingers. Thank you, Ino, she said, and for the first time since returning from Wave, the words held no hidden edge, no competitive spirit. They were just thanks. Ino offered a small, sad smile, a real one. Anytime, forrid. The old nickname slipped out, but it didn't sound like an insult this time. It sounded like a tether to a past that, while gone, had once been simple and good. Sakura gave a final nod, clutching the rosemary. She had come for poison, for weapons to add to her arsenal. She was leaving with something else entirely, a fragile human connection, and a reminder that strength could also be found in resilience and memory, not just in knowledge of death. It was a different kind of tool, one she hadn't known she needed. Turning, she left the shop, the clean, sharp scent of rosemary cutting through the shop's heavier perfumes, a small, living talisman against the darkness she was training to face. The air in the secluded forest clearing, far from the well-trodden paths of the standard training grounds, shimmered with displaced heat and the acrid, ozone-like scent of scorched chakra. This was not Training Ground 7 with its ghosts and memories. This was a hidden pocket of wilderness Naruto had claimed for his most dangerous and private experiments. Here, the only witnesses were the ancient trees and the curious, skittering creatures of the undergrowth. Naruto stood facing a colossal, moss-draped boulder that had likely rested in this spot for centuries. He took a deep, centering breath, the rhythm practiced and deliberate. The usual boisterous energy was coiled tightly inward, focused into a single, devastating point. His hands flew through a series of seals, ram, snake, boar, horse, tiger, each movement crisp, economical, bearing the unmistakable, polished imprint of Uchiha muscle memory. As he formed the final seal and brought his hands to his lips, his lungs expanded, drawing in not just air, but a torrent of chakra that flowed through pathways now threaded with a cooler, more precise energy than his own native power. Katen Gokaku no Jutsu. The world erupted from his mouth. It was not a stream of fire, but a roaring, condensed sphere of apocalyptic orange and blinding white heat. It tore through the intervening space with a sound like a tearing canvas, a miniature sun hurled with lethal intent. The air itself screamed in protest, rippling with visible waves of distortion. The fireball struck the center of the monumental boulder not with a mere impact, but with a concussive, vaporizing asterisk whump that shook the earth beneath Naruto's feet. A spiderweb of cracks, deep and glowing with residual heat, radiated outwards from the point of impact across the stone face. Chunks of superheated rock pattered to the forest floor like black, volcanic hail, sending up wisps of smoke from the damp leaf litter. The sheer, raw power was staggering, a testament to the potent fusion of Uzumaki stamina and Uchiha technique. As the last echoes of the blast faded and the blinding afterimage cleared from his vision, now permanently sharpened and clear, slow, thoughtful grin spread across Naruto's face. It wasn't his old, unrestrained cackle of triumph. It was the grin of an artisan assessing a first, powerful, but clumsy stroke. He chuckled to himself, the sound dry and analytical. The grin faded into a look of intense scrutiny as he studied the cracked, smoldering boulder. Control, I need to control the size. That was excessive for most situations. A beacon, a waste of chakra if the target is a person, not a fortress. His mind, honed by recent tragedy and inherited knowledge, was already dissecting the technique not for its glory but for its utility, precision, and appropriateness. A scalpel, not just a sledgehammer. Knowing when to use a candle flame and when to unleash a sun, that's the mastery. Satisfied with the test but deeply aware of its crudeness, he turned and walked to the base of a towering, broadleaf tree whose roots formed a natural seat. He sank down, his back against the rough bark, the coolness of the shaded earth seeping through his clothes. He had chosen this isolation deliberately. The populated training grounds carried too many eyes, the suspicious glances of villagers, the prying, analytical gaze of the Hokage ANBU, the potential interest of darker, root-like entities Danzo might have left twitching in the village's soil. Here he was free to fail, to experiment, to let the strange new currents of his chakra run wild, without observation or judgment. From within a sealed scroll tube at his hip, a new, pragmatic acquisition, he withdrew a carefully inked document. It was his personal blueprint, the inventory of absence now being methodically filled. At the top, in bold characters, it read, Sasuke's Legacy Integration Progress. He unrolled it, his onyx eyes scanning the list. His finger, calloused from days of relentless shuriken practice, moved down the parchment. He found the line for Shuriken Jutsu, Advanced Uchiha Patterns. With a stroke of dark ink, he ticked it off. The memory of a dozen perfect strikes thudding into a tree face under the moonlight was validation enough. Next, Taijutsu Uchiha interception and flow. Another firm tick. The aching muscles and bruised ribs from battling his own clones were a testament to its hardened integration. His finger moved down. Katen, Ryuka no Jutsu Dragon Flame Technique. Tick. The simpler streaming flame technique had come more easily, a logical stepping stone to the great fireball. He paused at the next line. Katen Gokukyu no Jutsu Great Fireball Technique. His finger hovered. He looked back at the cracked, steaming boulder, then at the scroll. He did not tick it off. Mastery was not about replication, it was about refinement, about ownership. He could perform it, yes, with terrifying power, but he could not yet wield it with the surgical precision its donor had eventually achieved. It remained a borrowed club, not a forged sword. He left it blank, a silent promise to the brother whose standards he now inwardly upheld. Setting the scroll on his knees, he steepled his fingers, resting his chin on them. The forest sounds the chirp of insects, the rustle of leaves filled the thoughtful silence. He mused aloud, his voice a low rumble that blended with the ambient life of the woods. I am better off asking Kakashi-sensei, not just about training, but about the eyes. His own hands came up, fingers brushing his eyelids, feeling the potent, dormant power beneath. All the abilities of the Sharingan that he knows, what he's learned from a lifetime of using one. The copy function, the predictive sight, its limits, its drains. Kakashi was no Uchiha, but he was the world's foremost expert on wielding their power as an outsider. That knowledge was now a critical strategic resource. His introspection turned inward. For now, I think I am lacking in chakra control, at least that's how I see it. The realization was profound. For years his problem had been having too much chakra, a raging river he could barely dam. Now, with Sasuke's refined, yin-heavy chakra woven into his own, the river had become a deeper, more powerful sea. Controlling the immense, dense energy for delicate work, for the precision he craved, for the eventual mastery of the mystical palm techniques Sakura was studying, for the flawless execution of advanced genjutsu he knew he must one day face and employ was the new monumental hurdle. The shadow clone technique was a brute force splitting of the whole. What he needed was the ability to spin threads of chakra as fine as spider silk. He looked back at the scroll, at the remaining unticked items, the uncharted territories of his inheritance. His finger traced the next lines. Katen Hosenka no Jutsu Phoenix Flower Technique, the technique of multiple homing fireballs. It required not just power, but an exquisite, divided control he did not yet possess. And below it, the line that gave him a particular grim pause. It was not a jutsu name, but a category, written in Sasuke's own, sharp script, echoed in Naruto's hand. Sharingan Evolution and Mangekyou. He stared at the words. They were a cliff edge, a potential abyss. The memories of the Tsukuyomi inherited through the eyes were a chilling enough lesson in what the pinnacle of this power could do. The path to it, Sasuke's notes hinted with typical bleakness, was paved with the most profound personal loss. It was a door he was not yet ready to approach, a dark potential he hoped, with every fiber of his being, he would never be forced to unlock. With a slow, deliberate motion, he re-rolled the scroll, sealing it away. The list was a map, and he had just plotted his immediate coordinates. Refine control, interrogate Kakashi, master the Phoenix Flower. The fireball had proven the potency of the legacy. Now the quiet, grueling work of true mastery began. He pushed himself to his feet, dusted off his pants, and turned back towards the cracked boulder, his expression set. The first thunderous note had been struck. Now he would learn the symphony. Back in his secluded clearing, the echoes of the great fireball's roar had been replaced by a profound, focused silence. Naruto stood perfectly still, his eyes closed, the world narrowed to the universe contained within his own palms. In each hand he held a simple, plucked leaf from the ancient tree, a pale green, slightly veined canvas upon which he would attempt to paint his will. He centered it carefully on his forehead, the cool, slightly waxy surface adhering to his skin through a faint film of natural moisture. With this, he murmured the words of vow to the empty air. I can practice this exercise again, the first one I ever failed. The memory of Uruka's patient, then exasperated face in the academy classroom was a ghost from a lifetime ago. But this time, I need to focus. Uruka-sensei is not here to guide me, or to be disappointed. This was between him and the chakra, between the boy who had once been all chaotic potential and the vessel of power he was now becoming. He regulated his breathing, sinking into a meditative state that felt both foreign and necessary. He willed his chakra to rise from his core, not in a torrent, but in a single silken thread. The goal was deceptively simple: to channel and rotate that thread with such perfect, unwavering control that it would anchor the leaf to his forehead against gravity's pull. Immediately he felt the difference. The sheer potency of his chakra was the first obstacle. It wasn't just vast anymore, it was dense, a heavy, luminous syrup compared to the watery energy of his classmates. Each ounce of it carried more power, more will, making fine manipulation like trying to thread a needle with a rope of molten steel. Furthermore, the integration of Sasuke's chakra was not a completed process. Deep within his coils, the yin-heavy Uchiha energy and his own yang-rich Uzumaki life force were still in a state of dynamic, volatile fusion of chakra alchemy that subtly shifted his internal balance from moment to moment, making a consistent, delicate output maddeningly difficult. The leaf twitched, a flare of chakra, a hair too strong, pulsed at his tenketsu point. The leaf didn't just fall, it was launched from his forehead as if flicked by an invisible finger, spiraling away to land among the roots. Naruto's eyes snapped open, a flicker of frustration in their onyx depths, but he didn't curse, he didn't shout, he simply watched the leaf settle, his expression hardening into granite resolve. This was the work. This was the grind that came before the glory of fireballs and perfect throws. This was mastering the storm within so he could command the typhoon without. He bent down, plucked another leaf, scented it, breathed, focused. Again, the chakra surged, unstable, a wild stallion refusing the bit. The leaf fluttered, held for a precarious 3 seconds, then peeled away. He grabbed another leaf, and another. Each failure was a data point. Each microsecond of adhesion was a victory. Sweat beaded on his temples, not from physical exertion, but from the intense mental and spiritual strain of wrestling a cosmic force into submission for the sake of a single, insignificant leaf. He was a sculptor trying to carve a masterpiece with a landslide, a composer trying to write a sonata with the sound of thunder. But Uzumaki Naruto had never relented in the face of a challenge, and this, the most fundamental challenge to his very essence, would be no different. The clearing filled with the soft, repeated whisper of falling leaves, a testament to a struggle invisible to the world but foundational to the shinobi being forged within it. On the opposite side of Konoha, in the dappled sunlight of Training Ground 10, a different kind of training was underway, underscored by a somber awareness. Kiba and Yuzuka landed in a crouch after a failed tandem attack with Akamaru, spitting out a mouthful of dirt. Even though Naruto lost a teammate, he grumbled, scratching the eager Ninken behind the ears. It's gotta be hard for the guy. Really hard. His usual brashness was tempered by a genuine, if clumsily expressed, gravity. The loss of a peer, a rival, even one from another team, had sent a shockwave through the genin ranks, a cold reminder of their profession's stakes. Kurenai Yuhai, her crimson eyes observing her team with a blend of sharp instruction and maternal concern, nodded slowly. The news of Uchiha Sasuke's death had settled over the village like a frost. Yes, Kiba, she said, her voice calm but carrying an unshakable weight. And that is all the more reason you should take your training seriously. Every technique mastered, every instinct honed, is a layer between you and a similar fate. Her gaze, gentle but unwavering, shifted to the shyest member of her squad, including you, Hinata. Hyuga Hinata, who had been practicing her gentle step twin lion fists against a training post, flinched as if struck. Her lavender eyes, capable of seeing the chakra network of a target a kilometer away, instantly dropped to her own feet. The mention of Naruto's name, coupled with the tragedy, sent her usual storm of anxious affection spiraling into a deeper maelstrom of empathetic pain and fear. Her fingers tangled together. "Why yes, Kurenai-sensei," she whispered, her voice so faint it was almost lost in the rustle of leaves. From the shade of a nearby tree, Shinoburam adjusted his glasses, the faint hum of his Kakachu colonies a constant backdrop to his speech. A precise analysis, he intoned, his voice devoid of inflection but full of logic. The statistical probability of mission fatalities decreases exponentially with unit competency and synergistic coordination. As the most logical member of this team, I have to agree with Kurenai-sensei's assessment. Emotional acknowledgement of a tragedy must be sublimated into practical preventative action. Kiba rounded on him, indignation flaring. Hey, I'm taking my training seriously. I'm just saying, it's rough is all. Don't act like you're the only one who gets it, you bug-eyed weirdo. Akamaru let out a supportive rough. Kurenai's voice, though not raised, cut through the brewing squabble with the sharpness of a kunai. Enough. The single word silenced them. She looked at each of them, Kiba's defiant heat, Hinata's anxious chill, Shino's analytical calm. Sympathy has its place, but this training ground is not that place. Here we convert awareness into action. We turn the fear of loss into the will to survive. Kiba, your fang-passing fang lacked synchronization with Akamaru's leap by 0.2 seconds. Hinata, your chakra expulsion is still hesitant. You must commit to the strike as if your life depends on it, because one day it will. Shino, your insect placement for area denial is efficient but predictable. Now, she commanded, her genjutsu master's presence weaving an aura of absolute focus around the clearing. Back to training. The lesson was clear. In one forest, a boy wrestled with the titanic forces within himself, seeking control over a power that could crack mountains. In another, a team grappled with the cold equations of survival, forging their bonds and skills in the sobering light of a teammate lost. Across Konoha, the echoes of a single death were being metabolized not just as grief, but as fuel for control, for precision, for a desperate collective resolve to be stronger, faster, and smarter than the cruel arithmetic of the shinobi world. The village trained on, each breath, each thrown punch, each focused thought, a silent rebuttal to the Reaper's ledger. The soft, persistent glow of a single oil lamp carved a pool of light in the otherwise dark expanse of Sakura's room, now more resembling a strategist's war room than a young girl's sanctuary. The air was redolent with the smell of aged parchment, ink, and the faint, astringent scent of medicinal herbs she had begun to catalogue. Before her, spread with tactical precision, were 3 distinct piles of scrolls and texts, representing the 3 pillars of the fortress she was determined to build. Her focus at this moment was on the leftmost pile, genjutsu, illusion and the manipulated mind. Her jade-green eyes, sharp with an intellect that had always been her truest weapon, scanned the dense theories. The principles were clear. Genjutsu required the insinuation of the user's chakra into the target's sensory system, a subtle rewiring of perception. It was an art of finesse, of psychological insight, of control so precise it could make the brain believe the sky was green or the ground was lava. The problem isn't the control, she murmured aloud, her voice a clinical whisper in the quiet room. Her fingers, delicate yet strong, traced a diagram of the cerebral chakra network. I have that. My chakra control has always been my one natural advantage. She remembered the effortless way she'd mastered tree walking, her chakra adhering with pinpoint accuracy. The problem is the reservoir. My chakra reserves are pitiful. I can tell that much just from the theory. To cast a sustained or powerful genjutsu required not just a surgeon's touch, but a surgeon's stamina. Her current reserves were a thimble, she needed a well. A note was jotted in the margins of her notebook in her neat, disciplined script. Primary limitation, chakra volume. Query, methods for safe, rapid expansion of chakra reserves. Beside it she wrote, ask Kakashi-sensei. He was the key. When the 2-week leave ended and the grim assembly of the new Team 7 began, he would be her first and most critical resource. She would corner him, demand not just training, but a curriculum tailored to brute force the evolution of her spiritual energy. For now, however, theory and preparation were her domains. She sat back, her gaze sweeping over the 3 piles. Medical ninjutsu, genjutsu, toxicology, a trinity of disciplines healing, deceiving, and harming. A cold doubt, the ghost of her old insecurity, tried to whisper, can you truly succeed in 3 such vast, demanding areas, you who could do nothing on the bridge? She crushed the thought with a will that was becoming second nature, her hands clenched into fists on the desk. I have no choice, she stated, the words flat and final, brooking no argument from her own psyche. I have to become powerful, to honor Sasuke's memory, as Naruto's brother, so I can at least stand alongside him in terms of power. The phrasing was deliberate. She didn't dream of surpassing him, not with the monstrous energy she sensed simmering beneath his surface, now fused with Sasuke's own legacy. Her goal was parity, to be a pillar beside him, not a burden behind him. a shield of equivalent strength to the sword he was becoming. A sigh escaped her, not of weariness, but of acceptance. This was her path, there was no other. "Naruto," she whispered to the silent room. "I haven't seen him since the funeral." A complex emotion swirled: concern, a fierce protective urge, and a strange, respectful distance. He was processing his own cataclysm. Perhaps their separation was necessary. Well, all the better, because after this leave, I'll be a different person. The girl who had wept over Sasuke's body would be gone, her tears transmuted into the steel of a kunoichi, who would ensure no one else she cared for would fall. Action replaced contemplation. The next phase of tonight's work was not theoretical, but physical, and carried its own inherent danger. She stood, moving to her mirror. With efficient, practiced motions, she gathered her long, cherry-blossom hair, once her pride, now simply an operational hazard, and twisted it into a severe, tight bun at the nape of her neck. Not a strand was out of place. Vanity was a discarded skin. From a drawer, she retrieved a pair of sturdy, nitrile medical gloves, purchased specifically for this purpose. She pulled them on, the material snapping snugly against her skin, a barrier between herself and the toxicological subjects of her study. Finally, she took a simple, woven basket from beside her door. Her mind ran through the mental checklist as she descended the stairs, moving with a quiet purpose that made her parents, speaking in hushed tones in the living room, fall silent and watch her pass with a mixture of pride and profound worry. She offered them a small, tight nod, but did not stop. "The plants I need today," she recited internally, stepping out into the cool evening air, the basket hooked over her arm, "are those related to sleeping agents. Datura stramonium for scopolamine, possible Papaver somniferum variants if they grow wild in the controlled sectors, mandragora root for its alkaloid compounds." This was not gardening, it was pharmacology with lethal potential. Her destination was not the vibrant, curated Yamanaka shop, but the deeper, untamed margins of Konoha's forests, where the village's botanical control loosened and nature's more dangerous children grew. She moved with a new awareness, her senses attuned not to beauty, but to utility and threat. Every rustle in the bushes, the scent of damp earth and decaying leaves, the pattern of moonlight through the canopiole were data points in her new reality. Sakura Haruno was no longer just studying to be a kunoichi. She was methodically, ruthlessly, building herself into one, piece by calculated piece, from the scalpels of medical knowledge to the poisons that could grace their edges. The forest awaited, a living library of silent, sleeping death, and she was its newest and most determined student. 4 days, a mere 96 hours, stood between the grim solitude of convalescent leave and the unknown crucible of the reformed Team 7. For Uzumaki Naruto, these were not days of rest, but of relentless, almost violent self-immolation in the fires of his new power. The secluded clearing bore the scars of his dedication. The great boulder was now a shattered monolith, its central mass vaporized, leaving only a ring of cracked, blackened stone. The surrounding trees were pockmarked, with thousands of perfectly placed shuriken wounds, and the earth was churned to mud from countless hours of taijutsu drills. Now, in the deep indigo hour before dawn, he stood at the center of a hurricane of his own making. The air was thick with the smell of ozone, scorched earth, and the peculiar scent of dispelling shadow clones. He was breathing heavily, not with exhaustion, but with the controlled, deep rhythm of a warrior in the eye of the storm. His clothes were torn, his skin marred with superficial burns and bruises that would have incapacitated a normal genin, testaments to the ferocity of the battle raging around him. Of the 200 shadow clones he had summoned to be his adversaries and training partners, only 30 remained. They were the most cunning, the most resilient, the ones who had adapted to his growing prowess. But the true terror of the exercise was the schism he had engineered among them. 7 of the remaining clones stood with eyes ablaze the spinning crimson of the sharing and casting hellish pools of light in the gloom. They moved with a predatory, unsettling grace, their attacks seamless, their defense preternatural. The other 23 fought with the furious, instinctive brawling style that was Naruto's original birthright, powerful, unpredictable, but lacking finesse. He was no longer fighting to learn Sasuke's techniques. He was fighting to survive an army that knew his mind, half of which wielded the very advantages he was trying to master. 2 clones, both without the Sharingan, broke from the encircling pack in a pincer movement. the one on the right, telegraphing its move with a roar, threw a wild, powerful haymaker. Naruto's own Sharingan active and whirling with two Tomo saw the kinetic pathway of the punch before the clone's shoulder even fully tensed. He didn't block it. Instead, he took a micro-step inward, his left hand shooting up to intercept and guide the massive fist harmlessly past his head. In the same fluid motion, his awareness, hyper-expanded by the Dojutsu, detected the faintest displacement of air behind him. The second clone, having used its comrade's frontal assault as a distraction, was lunging for a tackle at his kidneys. Naruto didn't turn. His right hand snapped backwards like a viper, his fingers clamping onto the charging clone's wrist. Using the clone's own momentum, he pivoted on his heel with brutal efficiency, yanking the clone off its feet and swinging it in a wide, screaming arc into the path of the first, off-balance attacker. Puff puff! Two clones vanished in a single, concussive cloud of smoke, but the trap had been a diversion. The clone on his left, momentarily obscured by the dispersing smoke, tried to dart to a new angle. Naruto's Sharingan cut through the visual chaos, tracking the blur of orange. He didn't chase. He dropped into a low roll backwards, putting precious distance between himself and the tightening ring of adversaries. Even as his body tumbled, his hands were a blur, weaving seals with a speed and certainty that would have made a Uchiha elder nod in approval. Snake, dragon, rabbit, boar, tiger. He came out of the roll onto one knee, fingers already at his lips. Katen Ryuka no Jutsu. This was not the fireball of days past. This was a concentrated, searing lance of blue-white flame, hotter and more focused, shaped by improved chakra control and the intuitive understanding of fire nature now baked into his being. It tore through the gloom like a vengeful spirit, not exploding but piercing. It bisected the scrambling group of non-Sharingan clones with surgical precision. The infernal heat didn't just dispel them. It seemed to vaporize them mid-stride, reducing their number by more than half in a single, devastating breath. Naruto rose from his kneeling position, his Sharingan scanning the suddenly sparse field. The carnage of dispelled clones left wisps of chakra smoke curling in the air. From this haze, one of the remaining non-Sharingan clones, seeing its brothers eradicated, let out a raw, wordless cry of fury and charged, abandoning all strategy for pure emotional rage. Naruto didn't move. His expression was calm, almost detached. His hand dropped to his pouch, drew a single kunai and threw it in one uninterruptible motion. There was no wind-up, no wasted effort. The blade flew straight and true, embedding itself with a sickening thunk directly in the center of the charging clone's forehead. It vanished, the kunai clattering to the churned earth. Then he moved. What followed was not a fight but a harvest. Against the remaining non-Sharingan clones, he was a god of war. He flowed between them, his Taijutsu a brutal synthesis of Uchiha interception and Uzumaki relentless force. A disarming parry broke a wrist, a heel kick shattered a knee, a palm strike to the sternum burst a clone like a soap bubble. Against the 7 Sharingan-wielding clones, the battle became a chilling, silent ballet of precognition and counter-prediction. It was a high-speed chess game where every move was seen 3 steps ahead. He baited one into overextending, shattered its guard with a feint it perceived but couldn't react to in time, and dispelled it with a chop to the neck. He used their own shared knowledge against them, exploiting the milliseconds of delay as they processed his intentions through the same visual filter he possessed. One by one they fell. The last Sharingan clone met his gaze, its identical red eyes locking with his. They charged simultaneously, a mirror image broken. Their kunai met in a shower of sparks. For a second they were frozen, strain identical on both faces. Then Naruto, drawing on the deep, dense well of his fused chakra, pushed. His blade inched forward, past the clone's guard, and tapped its chest. Puff! Silence, absolute and total, descended upon the clearing. The first grey light of dawn began to bleed into the sky. Naruto stood alone amidst the dissipating smoke, his Sharingan slowly fading, leaving his onyx eyes dark and depthless. He was bruised, bleeding from a dozen minor cuts, his chakra reserves significantly depleted but still burning with a formidable, steady flame. The clearing was a wasteland. The 200 clones were gone. He had not just survived the onslaught, he had orchestrated it, controlled it, and ultimately dominated it. The power Sasuke had given him was no longer a borrowed suit of armor. It was the steel of his own bones, the fire in his own blood. He had almost mastered it. In 4 days, the world would see not the grieving, blind boy who left the hospital, but a weapon meticulously honed in secret, ready for whatever new hell his sensei, his village, or his brother's ghost had in store for him. He took a final, deep breath of the smoke-tinged air, sheathed his kunai, and turned towards the creeping dawn. The self-forged blade was sharp. Now it awaited a worthy whetstone.
And that wraps up this part of Combined Legacies. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for the next part of the story. Every notification, every view, it really helps keep this series going. Until next time, this is Six Paths Theorist, signing off.